First, a background on me. I grew up in Wichita. When I talk about rural communities, I like to say, and I mean this, Wichita is Kansas's largest small town. If you're not from here, that may sound anecdotal and may not make any sense, but if you're from here, you realize that if you're in the business community, or you're in the nonprofit community, or you're just in the volunteering, it's a close-knit community. There's a lot of people, but there's close networks, and we look out for each other just like every small community does, and I'm very proud of that. Very proud to have grown up in Wichita, and very proud to be a citizen of the state of Kansas. So I did grow up here. My dad's an architect, my mom's a nurse. I think one of the greatest things I got from the family that I had growing up was a sense of public service. Both have been deeply involved in the community that we're in. I went to Wichita State University, where I got my undergraduate degree in all things philosophy with a minor in math. And then I went on and got a master's degree in sociology. And that's where the story starts to turn towards research and analysis, because that's what I love. I mean, I got the minor in math because I like numbers. And I got the master's degree in sociology because they had a quantitative sociology program where you focused on researching statistics, researching and data mining government databases like the census data, and figuring out how you make correlations between things. What's the cause, what's the effect? And that just fascinated me. Quite frankly, I'll say this. I like to be considered a research analyst, and a lot of times I'm embarrassed when I call myself a real estate developer, because real estate developers haven't done enough. Private industry hasn't done enough. And so that's one of the things I'm going to talk about today. Let me finish the story about my background. After I graduated, I decided I wanted to be in real estate, and I wanted to learn it from the ground up. So I started out doing commercial appraisal at Martin's Companies, which is the largest commercial appraisal firm here in Wichita. I then went on and was hired by Jack DeBoer, who started Value Place Hotels, and I built the research and project planning department at Value Place. And then I was hired to be the very first research analyst for the WSU Center for Real Estate and help build their research department out there. So it's research, research, research. That's what I've done. And so when I decided I wanted to get into real estate development, I wanted to learn it from the ground up. I want to learn everything about it, not only just how other people do it, but how to do it right. I started out flipping houses. Half a dozen houses I flipped, taught myself how to rebuild countertops, taught myself how to tile floors, just how to do everything that needed to be done. Also how to hire people and run a small crew, if you can even call it that. Out of respect to my contractor partners, they're probably saying, yeah, you know nothing about running crews, but I got my feet wet. I did it the right way. I started at the bottom, trying to figure out how these things are done and how they're done correctly. And so after I flipped about half a dozen houses, I actually met a guy named Dave Burke, who's largely responsible for developing the Old Town area here in Wichita. Dave had what was one time the original Wichita High School. Hadn't been a high school for years. It was actually the Wichita Area Technical College at the time that he put it under contract, because that WATC was selling the building and moving. So he had this building under contract. It was 2009. The housing bubble had just burst. There were bailouts going on, and banks weren't lending to anything that would be considered speculative development. And speculative development is when you're taking something and turning it into something that's never been, and turning a school into apartments. That's speculative development. So even though he was Dave Burke and had this incredible reputation and had done a lot of projects, he was having a hard time getting the project financed. So I went to Dave, had a mutual introduction, found out about this project he was working on, and said, I'll work for free. I'll just partner with you. I think I can help you get this thing done, and if I help you get this thing done, then you decide what it was worth to you. Because I just look forward to having the opportunity to learn from your experience and work with somebody who's a member of my community and is doing some of the things that I want to do. So we partnered up, and we got the project financed, and we turned the original Wichita High School into 68 apartment units, market rate. It was a tax credit project because it utilizes historic preservation tax credits. A couple things I learned from that project, and here's the image on the top are the flats apartments, so that's what that project was. A couple things I learned about that project was, one, there are some incentives that are very valuable. Historic preservation tax credit incentives play an important role because our society typically hasn't done a good job preserving things like historic properties. There's other good incentive programs out there through the Kansas Department of Commerce, the Kansas Housing Resource Corporation. Low-income people need help because it's just there's not very many economic incentives to go out and build housing and make it affordable. But that's where I'm going to stop in saying I think incentives are good. Because I'll tell you right here and right now, and I'm not going to make any more friends in the real estate development community, but there's a lot of people out there that chase incentives. There's a lot of developers out there that don't care about your community. They don't care about anything other than, can I do a project? Can it be, and this is words I've heard people say before, can it be a juicy project where I can make a lot of money on it? And where's the flavor of the day? Where's the flavor of the day? Can I ride the coattails on the low-income housing credits? Can I ride the coattails on the historic preservation tax credits? Where's the next place that the government's going to hand out money and maybe I can get some and take it and run with it? And that doesn't do anybody any good. And so I made a determination after I did that project. And again, I believe in all the projects Dave's done, and he does do a lot of historic preservation tax credit projects. But I made a personal decision at that point. I said I'm not going to use any incentives from this point on when I do development. I'm going to develop a model for market rate apartments because that's what's needed. And I'm going to figure out how to do it from the ground up without any incentives, local, state, federal incentives to make it work. So the picture on the bottom is a project that my first big project I did. It's at K96 and Oliver here in Wichita. It's called Chisholm Lake Apartments. It's 216 units. It's what I would consider upper scale apartments. We're the price leader in Northeast Wichita. We're the price leader though because we did our research, we did our homework. We realized that there were high occupancy rates and they were going higher, and we realized rent rates hadn't gone higher because nobody pushed them, honestly. And so when we opened this property, we planned, we did our due diligence. I did hundreds of pages of analyses for myself and my development team. And we said, we won't go into a market unless we can do a market rate project at the rent rates that are already there. And so the rent rates in Northeast Wichita at the time were $1 a square foot. So we said, we're not going to anticipate making a cent more because to do so would be foolish and put us at risk. But I knew that we could push rents higher because nobody else was doing the analysis. So we opened the doors. And just to tell you the success rate, the flats apartments downtown I did with Dave, I analyzed based upon how quickly similar projects had leased up that we could probably lease up in about 7 months. We leased up in 5. That was 68 units leased up in 5 months. When we opened the doors here, first of all, we had 6 people move in on day 1 and they never stepped foot in an apartment because we didn't get our certificate of occupancy until the day before. So we leased up the first 68 units here in 3 months. And it's not because we were lucky, it's because we did our homework. Because we analyzed this and figured out what the market needed, where they needed it, and we just provided what the market wanted. And so this project is almost fully open, and we are a price leader. We're now at $1.20 per square foot income that we're getting on our rents. After I did this project, then I started going to the larger communities and saying, I've got this idea for apartments, working in Wichita, I want to do it in your community. I went to Oklahoma City, Kansas City, bigger cities around the region, and had about a dozen projects in the pipeline. When I say in the pipeline, I mean I've had committed landowners or serious conversations with landowners about equity in their land. And I was introduced at that time by Matt Jordan, who's making a lot of great connections for me in my career now that I think about it. Matt Jordan introduced me to the city manager and assistant city manager in Newton, and I started talking to them, and then I started talking to some other community leaders, and suddenly realized, hey, I'm just part of a large herd in these big cities. There's just a lot of people coming in these towns looking at doing development. But there's nobody looking at the smaller towns. And man, they have a real need for development. They have a real need for better housing options. And being the problem solver that I like to think I am, I thought this is a much better challenge than just trying to repeat the K96 and Oliver project in other communities. So I sat down and scrapped all of the big city projects we had about 8 or 9 months ago and said, I'm going to solve this problem, or I shouldn't be a real estate developer. I shouldn't be a real estate analyst. And so I went to work with my intern architect and my staff and great architectural partners like Spangenberg, Phillips, Tice, and also Studium Architects and companies like Icon Structures, which is a contractor, K.E. Miller Engineering, and some engineering partners that we had. And we just worked hard. We looked at, first of all, a lot of different types of concepts and different potential projects, and we looked at different communities, and it took us 8 or 9 months to come up with a prototype for small towns, but we did it. And so one of the things I want to show you here today, I've been talking long enough, I don't even know where I'm at on my slides, so that's pretty good timing. Go back, go back. Okay, so the keys to building a successful model for rural housing, first of all, it is really, really hard. It took us almost a year and about $250,000 investment to figure it out. And it took more things than I thought were going to be needed to make it work. But I feel like we've got a really solid model to provide market rate workforce housing, no need for incentives, where we come in as community partner with you. First of all, we ask you what you need, where do you need it? Is it market rate housing? Is that what you need? What area of your community do you need it in? Where can we be a catalyst for future development? We're working right now on a great potential project in Wellington. We didn't go in with a map and say we might want to be here, 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 and here. We said, where does it make sense? And they had this corridor where they had some momentum, where they built their new high school, where the Walmart had come in, where they had some great retail development going on. We worked with the city. We worked with Larry Thurr, who's a real estate professional there, and we identified this whole big field around this development that had been done in the past, but that was kind of pushing out even further, and said, let's go here. If we put multifamily housing here, it'll be a catalyst for more things, because everybody that knows if you're trying to attract retail or office or commercial development, you want to tell them you have the rooftops in the area, the people that are going to be nearby that will spend money at the stores and different things you're building. So we worked with the community to figure out where the best site was going to be so that we could be a community partner in a true public-private relationship with that community to figure out what worked for that community so that our model could be successful. So the pieces that it took to get this model together, first of all, we had something that we came to call cooperative collaboration. It started with the K96 and Oliver project. In order to make that project work without any incentives, I went to my architect partners, my contract partners, my engineer partners, and I said, do you believe in me and what I'm trying to do, and will you equity in your fees, a part of your fees into this project to be owner partners with me? One, I want you to have skin in the game. I want to know everybody on my team has skin in the game. And two, it can help me bring down those soft costs, as they call them, those initial fees you have to spend to figure out how a project's going to work. They said yes. They said, we believe in this. We want to partner with you on this. Then I went to the landowners and said, will you equity in the land as an owner partner with us? Because that'll help me bring down my initial costs. I won't have any acquisition costs, and that'll help out tremendously. And they said, we believe in this project. We'll partner with you. And so we started down this road of what we call cooperative collaboration. And this isn't something I'm not going to veer from. We require all of our development partners to be owner partners with us, to equity in a part of their fee. They get paid some things because they got to keep the lights on. But then we also look for landowner partners in the community. And when we try to figure out valuations for land, we're very fair about it. It's not a take it or leave it. Here's an appraisal. Here's what your land's worth. I used to do commercial appraisal, so I know it's worth whatever somebody will pay for it or what somebody will buy it for. So we're very fair with everybody in valuing what their piece is worth. But everybody comes in together. They come in as the developer, we have our community partners, we have our development teams, we work with banks, we work with investors, and everybody works together to figure out what the right project is, where it should go. So the problem in rural communities, being small towns, is that just because of the demographics, your rent rates are 10, 20, sometimes 30% lower than in a community like Wichita, and your construction costs can be 10, 20% higher because you got to truck in the labor, truck in all the material. That doesn't make my job very easy because in Wichita we've got higher rents and lower construction costs, and you just invert that whole situation when you go to these smaller towns. So when we first went and came up with the cooperative collaboration, had everybody equity in, that got us to the finish line in Wichita where we had higher rent rates. It didn't get us to the finish line on a rural prototype concept. So then we had to go start with a blank piece of paper and take all the lessons we learned from architectural design and engineering to figure out how to redesign an apartment concept, just from the ground up. K96 and Oliver, if you go out there, it's got really nice stone all wrapped around the first floor and these big stone columns and these nice big balconies. And we said, that does not contribute to somebody's quality of their living experience. And so we got rid of all those things that don't directly contribute to it being a quality place to live. We got rid of the stone. In some places we got rid of the balconies. Now I'll tell you this, our prototype's meant to be the base prototype. So if you got a community where you want us to build apartments or look at building apartments near a nice neighborhood, and those neighborhoods have certain development standards, whether it's adding brick or other things, we can add that stuff back on. But we wanted to look at what is the basic that we can do so we can bring down that construction cost. And we really brought down the construction costs on a square foot basis and on a per unit basis, and that didn't get us to the finish line. And so then what we had to do is we had to look at how we could value engineer, as they say in the construction business, go in and everything, whether we took lighting fixtures and said, okay, those are nice, but we found one over here that's almost as nice but not quite, but it costs less, so let's value engineer this thing and try to bring things down even further. And so we went through that process and cut out quite a bit of the fat, and it still didn't get us to the finish line. But what we did do is as we were going through that process is that we kept an eye on the living experience. So again, you can see there's no balconies, you can see there's no stone, there isn't even a clubhouse, and this is our 95-unit concept, and we handed out booklets, so I'm not going to go too into detail of all of our different prototypes. That's why I wanted to give that to you, because I didn't want to spend too much time today on this part of the talk and giving you a sales pitch. But so when you look at our base 95-unit concept, where that little addition is, that's the leasing office, and that's where we've got a little exercise room and a few little amenities. You got a central park area, which is a lot of green space, and it's got up there that kind of dark brown square is a community garden. Next to that is a cookout area. Next to that is a playground. We wanted to have a broad array of amenities too, because in Wichita we're a large enough city where we try to target what I refer to as a holy grail of tenants, which is 25, 35-year-old young professionals, disposable income, spend a lot, to keep really good care of their property. But in small communities, there's a whole mix of demographics that you're going to be looking for housing options. You'll have single people, you'll have people with kids, you'll have senior citizens that are looking for a place to rent. So we really want to create an environment where we look at all those different options for the development. And so this is just a little brief kind of fly through of the way that a typical property of ours works. Let's pause it there. Let's actually skip ahead to past the video because it's going to take too much time. So kept cutting away at cost, trying to create a financially feasible model, and going through all the construction design and engineering, we just couldn't still get the numbers right. So we decided we've got to go into the management business. Because when you go out and you try to hire somebody to manage a multifamily property for you, you're talking about 35, 45, 50% right off the top of your gross revenue and expenses. It comes into some expenses you can't change, like property taxes and insurance, but then it just goes into other things like overhead that these management companies typically have, and some are much fatter than others, or things like the management fee. And so we started a management company. It did two things for us. Number one, we found a way to reduce the cost significantly. We're looking at more like a 20 to 25% gross revenue number when we're talking about the expenses related to a project. So we really cut that down to the bare bones. We also wanted to really create a great living experience. So our management company is very unique. We take what we refer to as an amenity-rich approach to property management, where we have all kinds of things that we do in terms of what we supply the people that live there. We're not in the property management business, we're going to be in the customer service business, because we want to create a great living opportunity for people that live in our communities, because we want people to be proud to live in them. We want people who are moving their businesses to your communities to stop saying you don't have any good options, to people saying, God, I love this place that I'm living in. I'm going to tell my friends in other communities about this apartment complex we live in. So we're going to have our manager and assistant manager not just answering phones and showing units. They're going to be doing things like providing maid service and wash, dry, and fold laundry service and on-site car washing. This is just a partial list of all the things we're going to do. That also helps supplement our income a little bit to shift the model to having services that tenants can pay for and shift it away from being a burden on the development process. So just trying to be as innovative as we could in finding ways to bring down the cost associated. So once we had that final piece of the management, that back end reducing the operating expenses, the numbers started to work. Now when I say the numbers work, you can't just break even. You can't just break even on any type of business, or nobody's going to do the business. You've got to make money, and you've got to, more importantly, provide a good return to investors. if I'm not going to use any incentives, if I'm not going to use any type of government financing, I've got to make sure I return a good return to our investors. And so we have created this rural housing model that not only doesn't use incentives, but it has a good solid investment model so that we can partner with communities to figure out where these projects go, but also have a very enticing investment opportunity either for large investors, and we have large individual investors we work with. We have insurance companies we're talking to. We have an array of people that are potential investors. But I actually am most excited about the prospect of getting communities involved. There's a program through the state of Kansas actually called the Invest Kansas Exemption, and it allows you to raise $5,000 a time from individuals and not have to go through all the SEC Securities and Exchange regulations. And so we've got the possibility of raising up to $1 million for these projects just by going into local communities and saying, hey, does anybody here in your community want to invest $5,000 in an apartment project? Quite frankly, we can raise it from anywhere in Kansas. As long as it's a Kansas project built in Kansas and the investors are from Kansas, again, we can raise up to $5,000 at a time from individuals. That doesn't make sense to you. The Securities and Exchange Commission says you can't go out and solicit people to invest in your business unless they're a qualified investor, which means they make $200,000 a year or more or have $1 million in assets, because those people are gauged as being experienced enough to understand the complications of investment. The SEC protects other smaller investors from being taken advantage of or not fully understanding investment opportunity by saying if you're going to have anybody else invest that's not at that high level, you need to go through and organize as a public company and have all these documents and legal hurdles that you go through. But there's certain exemptions, and so that's one of them. When I told my business and real estate development friends that some people that I know that I was thinking about raising $5,000 at a time, which would mean 200 people from a community being my investment partners, most of them said I was nuts. Why do you want 200 people? Why do you want to have the burden of 200 people investing in your project? I didn't say it, but I thought, you just don't get it. 200 people involved in my project isn't a burden. 200 people involved in one of my projects is a community effort. It's a lot of people in the community being involved. I mean, there's nothing better for me as someone that wants to build real estate. I almost said real estate developer. That wants to build real estate to say, you know, I've got 200 people in my community that believed enough in this project, in this community that believed enough in the project that they invested their hard-earned money into it, and they take pride in it, and they can tell their friends, hey, send your kid to go live over in my apartment complex over there. That's just being involved. That's being public and private in partnership together to create solutions. So that's what we wanted to focus on. So just real quickly, what's in the packet before you? One of the things I wanted to give you that you could take away was just a real simple overview of our prototype. So we have a 24-unit prototype. That's our smallest. The 24-unit prototype can work in towns as small as 1,500 people. It could work possibly in smaller communities, because when I say 1,500 people, that's an all things, everything else being equal type of statement. We're going to drill down, we're going to look at your demographics, but our 24 units can fit in communities that small. We've got a 48 unit, which doubles that size. We've also got a 95 unit, and then our largest one is our 95 unit times 2, where again, when we come in with the first phase of the first 95 units, we don't do a big clubhouse or pool or anything else because we just can't afford to. But we would love to provide communities, and our 192 unit prototype will fit in communities 15,000 people or larger. And so when we get in those communities, we really want to provide you with, you know, a bigger city quality of apartment complex, because all of these are market rate workforce housing, and you may have people who went to school somewhere else, came from a bigger city, and are moving there to be a teacher in your community or to work in your community in another job, and they've got a whole different standard of what they're looking for when they're trying to find transitional housing. And so we want to have that option for larger communities. Okay. One other thing that I want to mention, I'm going to wrap up because I've gone over time, is, and you'll hear more about this in the future, so I'm just going to mention it very briefly. I think that there's still more need for innovation even in low-income housing. Low-income housing, there's a lot of great efforts that have been put into it, but one of the pieces I've seen lacking in low-income housing, just because no one's ever taken on the challenge to attack it, is that low-income housing should do more than just displace people. than just gather up people in a certain low-income demographic and shove them over here. And so when I got my model done for our prototypes, I just did the math to see where our break-even point was, and I suddenly realized we could still break even and not lose money if somebody making minimum wage was renting one of our units at 30%, and spending only 30% of their income. So I realized we got a low-income housing project. But I didn't want to do low-income housing unless, first of all, we did it nonprofit. Low-income poverty intervention done for profit, it just doesn't make sense to me. So we started a nonprofit initiative called Sparrow House, and what its whole focus is we take our 4-unit apartment complex and then we put a school there. A school there and a community center there. So 96 families at a time move in. Their infant age child gets into the early childhood education program. There's a K through 12 program there that's an online based program too. We haven't built the first one, but we're well down the road on our way to. And then that community center is also used for adult education. We're partnered with people from Wichita State University, Friends University, Newman. We're partnered now with people from Butler Community College, Wichita Area Technical College. All of these people are coming together, and we're going to have a meeting here in 2 weeks to keep moving this project forward. We hope to break ground on our first Sparrow House in Wichita in 2014. And that's one of the things I'm excited about. And I share this with you because as analysts, one of the things we hope to do is have lessons learned from this. This is a bigger city project because we have to raise millions of dollars for the education center, even though the apartments pay for themselves. But we're going to take lessons learned from this. And my hope is that one of the next things we can do is maybe integrate a daycare facility in some of our apartments, because we know that's one of the things that you struggle with in your communities too, is not only how do you provide quality housing, but how do you give a place for people to go take their kids so that they can go to work and earn their living. And there's no better place for somebody to take their kids than to leave them at home in the community with their neighbors. And so I bring this up because I want to say, as we go forward this year, first of all, I'd like to do 2 things. Number one, I'd like to work with the community to look at whether we can work together to build housing that is right for you, that's workforce market rate housing. Number 2, I'd like to volunteer myself and my company's resources to be helpful to you in any way. There's instances where for project financing or other reasons you may have to buy something like a housing study. Don't spend $10, $15, $20, $50,000 in a housing study that's going to be stuck on a shelf. If you need some help with research and analysis, first of all, we're not going to volunteer to fill out your housing assessment tool. And we will require, I'm going to stay here also and say, we won't help you with research and analysis for free until you fill out that housing assessment tool and get engaged. But we're good at what we do, and there's no reason we shouldn't be helpful to other people and share our resources that can help you solve problems. So you pick up the phone any day where you have a developer that wants to come in and build a retail, or if you have an employer that says they want to come in and they want to bring more jobs to your community, but they need you to do some type of an arm's length housing study or some type of a survey to show them the numbers, call us. We'll help you figure that out. We'll help you put that down on paper so that you can keep moving. And because we really do. We want to be true partners with you and your communities. We're going to go into communities, and regardless of the community, we're going to have people who don't want to see a developer walk in the door. We're going to have cities where we get voted against before they even hear what we're talking about. And I think that's good. That's a healthy community. A healthy community has debate. A healthy community has different voices. And we may not be the right solution for every community. And so if we come and talk to you and we don't have the right product for you, the right way to help, at least we talked. At least we got to know each other. At least we got to become part of each other's network. So thanks for taking the time today. We're going to go to a panel discussion now.